lay any burden on me, only sustain me, and sever any tie in my heart except the tie that binds my heart to yours. If you have men who will only come if they know there is a good road, I don't want them. I want men who will come if there is no road at all. I will go anywhere, provided it be forward. David Livingstone.
Thank you so much. That's from our theme for the week of the year for 2024 of irreversibility, Eyes to the Stars. Our theme this week for Gems from the Wisdom Traditions, a conversation circle that we sponsor every week here at Still and Moving Center, is the logic of reincarnation. To speak for us, to begin, is Liseth Ansadeh, and she originally comes from South America. She lives in North Carolina right now. She's a longtime student of the philosophy of Theosophy, which she shares with her 12-year-old daughter, amongst others. And so we're very happy to have her lead us as a very eclectic group who come from many different traditions in this idea of reincarnation and what is it all about and what is the logic behind it. So Liseth, I'll hand it right over to you, if I may.
Thank you. I want to say it is an honor to participate in a group like this because this just is another representation of how well connected we are, even though distances are physically in between us, but it is an amazing way to see how connected we are in a moment. So tonight I'm going to talk about the logic of reincarnation, but from the philosophical perspective. Different religions, different philosophical frameworks will approach reincarnation in different ways. But there is always one question that is present in any person's mind, is what happened with us when we die. Do we just die and is that the end of life? Or do we go to another place? If is that the case, so what it goes to another place, and what place is that one? And what happened there, no? Some religions will say, but most of the monotheist religions will recognize the existence of a soul. And the destiny of that soul when the physical body dies, it will depend upon of what that person did during the physical life. For example, some religions will say, well, that soul goes either to heaven or hell. Other ones will say, well, we just go to a place, but we really don't know where it is, but something happened. Or others will say, well, that soul will come back. And that's how reincarnation happened. From the theosophical point of view, the consideration of reincarnation, of life in general, comes down to two main questions. One, what is the purpose of life? And two, what is the purpose of death? Because everything in nature has a purpose. So Theosophy explains these two questions based on the three fundamental propositions that were shared by H.P.B. Blavatsky in the Secret Doctrine. And these three propositions say, well, our first proposition is that it's something that we cannot define. That is called, we could call it the absolute, but any conceptualization, any adjective that we do, it's not going to be right because it cannot be defined. And that is from everything that is manifested, come from, and will come from, and will be always there. And then from that absolute, everything else happened. And then we have the way how this process of manifestation happened. And it's explaining in the second fundamental, which indicates that this universe and life in general works on the conception of cycles. And under this cycle, there is a law that is an universal law that it creates harmony, and it can explain how all this universe works, and that is the law of karma. But that karma law has a twin sister, if we can say it in a colloquial way, that is reincarnation. And we will see that why, and here is where our interpretation of the logic of reincarnation comes from. Then the third fundamental, which is tied to our conversation tonight, is the evolution, that nature is permanently in evolution. And the soul, the real soul, or the universal soul, it is in an eternal pilgrimage in order to evolve and go back from that source where everything came from. I'm saying this because in Theosophy, when we study reincarnation, then we have to have these three ideas in mind in order to understand a process that comes as a natural way, or a natural process again. So in Theosophy, we say that when somebody dies, what it ties is only that physical body and some other principles of what the real man is. So for Theosophy, the composition of the man as the universe as well is septenary. So the man or the woman, in this case, let's call it, this person has 7 principles that is present in each of us. However, we see this separation in this way in order for us to understand what it is, but in reality, we just want, going back to that idea of unity. So from those 7 principles, the 3 superior is what in Theosophy is called the higher triad, and it's called Atma, Buddhi, and Mana. And then we have the lower 4 principles, or what is called the lower quaternary, that includes the physical body, the astral body, the kama, they call it kama rupa, but it's the body of desire, and the vitali or prana, that is also called in that way in Theosophy. So when we see that somebody, when somebody dies, what really dies, it's these 4 lower principles, and then the 3 principles, which are the real men, stay intact. So Mr. William Q. Judge and Mr. Crosby write a lot about what reincarnation is, and they say, well, the physical body dies because it's part of the physical world where we are, and the components are just going to become other part of organic matter. And then the astral body, which is an extension in the astral way of this physical body, we eventually die too. But what and the karma, or the decided, will eventually disappear or will eventually, it's not disappear, but eventually it will cease their existence, but that takes another process because it was created in a very, it was created by us in so many different levels that the process for that to conclude their existence takes another level. But then the higher triad stays there. So what happened when when the person dies is that all the lower quaternary goes to a process of disintegration, and that would take a time. But then that part that do not disappear, that do not die, that is the real ego, understanding ego not from the egocentric point of view, but as another way to understand the soul, will go to a place of rest. That is what in theosophy is called Devachan or Devakan or Devahan, depending on how the pronunciation is. I think the right pronunciation is Devahan. And that soul will have a time of rest there until the cycle of that rest process takes time. But then it will come back, and this is where the reincarnation process happens, when the cycle of rest has achieved, that moment of it's time to go back to the other process. And when the magnetic fields that those passions and desires that were created during the incarnation, the past incarnation, are strong enough to bring back that ego to the new incarnation. So in theosophy, it's explained that the ego will go back to fulfill all those tasks that are pending to finish, and that it goes hands to hand with the passions and desires and the actions that were generated during the incarnation. So to those passions and desires that are there and that we are the only responsible for, in theosophy we call that skandhas. And the skandhas will attract the soul back to that source of energy that was created for us. But before this ego incarnates again, HPB mentions that the ego will have this moment where it will realize the reason why it's coming back and the circumstances that makes that reincarnation to happen. And that glimpse happens just before conception, and then a baby is born. And then we talk about how those skandhas become part of the DNA of the information, the genetic information that we bring with us when we are born. And then what is important here is to understand that reincarnation is a process that happens because of the karma that we are creating. And that karma is through our actions, our thoughts, our inactions as well. And it's something that it is a process that will continue to happen as long as we continue to create karma, because we are the only responsible for to fulfill and to fulfill that responsibility from things that we have created consciously or unconsciously. And then that's one aspect of why we reincarnate. But the other aspect that the reason why we reincarnate is because we have this duty, as I mentioned in the third fundamental and in the third fundamental proposition of continued evolution. So one life is not enough to fulfill the task that we have, not only from the physical point of view of what we have created, but also from the spiritual point of view, because our responsibility is to fulfill self-consciousness through our self-induced and self-divide effort. So we can see reincarnation, then it happens in two levels. One, what we have created, and one, what is the spiritual task that we have ahead. Once when self-consciousness has happened, then the wheel of reincarnation might stop, but other levels of evolution and responsibilities will come in, because another point that is part of theosophy is the understanding that these tasks or this responsibility that we have, it's not only with our own individual soul, but with the collective sentient beings that are part of that monad that we are part of. So our responsibility then goes into another level, because we are here also to help those lower kingdoms to achieve a state of self-consciousness. So our responsibility is individual, but also collective. So then in that way, we can see reincarnation in different levels and different reasons. I'm gonna leave it here, and then we can have some questions and comments, or I can go more if you would like to.
Thank you so much, Lisa. That was very concise and deep at the same time. So if I heard you correctly, there is, theosophically speaking, a higher triad that is immortal, that is what would reincarnate into the future. And then we have a lower quaternary of aspects of ourselves that is not immortal. So it's going to, the physical body is going to die. The Linga Sharir, which is like the pattern body or astral body, that's going to disintegrate. The desire body is going to disintegrate. The breath is going to leave. That's prana. That's going to leave. So all of those are more temporary. And you said, if I understood about our responsibility, that we're all in this evolutionary process together, and it's not just human beings. It's all these other aspects of nature. So would I be understanding things correctly to say that these all these kind of lower levels of ourselves that we're living in, like our physical body is made up of living cells, and like must be our pattern body or astral body has something in it that's also evolving, and our desire nature. So our responsibility while we're in these bodies and all these other lower vestures is to help raise those up. Is that, am I understanding that as part of what you're saying?
That was beautifully expressed as part of, yeah, it is what theosophy states as how and why we are here, and how we act, and what we need to do, or what our responsibility is. And I think that's the beauty of theosophy, that it really explained what we are, and in a way that it helps us to put aside a personality that we have right now, because today I'm Lisette, but I don't know in my previous life who I was, and I don't know who I will be. However, at this stage, this student understand that this is transitory and is more a tool in order to fulfill the different responsibilities that as a soul we have, and how we are just integrated in a universe that and in nature that everything is, as I say at the beginning, is connected. So we just part of that. We are not a separation, or we are not separated from that, even though we are right now in the evolutionary process, beings that have developed consciousness during this evolutionary process. But that consciousness also comes with that responsibility of knowing not only what we are, but how we are all united with everything, and how we are responsible in that process of taking all nature and lower kingdoms to raise to that conscious levels as well.
Yeah, thank you. We'd like to throw this conversation open for thoughts and questions. Liseth is a wonderful resource for us, and also there's a lot of collective wisdom in this group. As I look out on these faces, there's a lot of collective wisdom. And so I'd like to hear your comments, your questions, any reflections you might have.
I don't think I did it so clearly, so I hope or maybe I'm thinking, that was too clear, maybe too convincing. I don't think so.
Michael, do you have a reason maybe you're here? Do you have thoughts about reincarnation you'd like to explore? Or maybe even experience that you are able to share with us?
These are very deep and profound and difficult questions. Takes us to the limits of our understanding. I'm thinking of a book I'm reading at the moment, some similarities. For some reason, I'm reading Bindo. It's called Rebirth and Karma. Very, very interesting book. I think he says that rebirth and karma depend on each other and they need each other. And I think he talks about evolution to a great spirit, a great self. But very challenging questions. I don't have any answers.
Well, based on your background, I think you have a lot of wonderings and really exploratory thought, which is probably the best way to approach the whole thing.
I'd be curious about what Jonathan's questions are.
Jonathan Colbert?
I'm sorry, was that who was just speaking?
That was Michael Brant.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'd be curious about his questions on the topic.
Or even just one. Do you have one question that kind of has spurred you to continue reading that book or pick it up in the first place, Michael?
Very, very, very deep and profound stuff. I'm just reading it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Not to put you on the spot. Who else?
May I ask a question?
Absolutely, Robin.
Thank you so much. My question is, since a very dear family member passed in the last year, I've always been very present in being in life and not ruminating too much about what happens next, because it seems like such a mystery and it's all hypothesis seemingly. But I'd like to know what our speaker has to say about life after death, and if somebody who has passed, a dearly beloved family member, died unexpectedly. Well, I guess it's always unexpected for the most part. What do they keep their beingness, their identity intact? Is there potentially a way of communing with them, even though I'm not much into the astral realm? And is it helpful to send prayers and affirmations in their direction? Or is there ego identity that we knew in this lifetime, does that dissipate into something else, or does that stay intact? If you could maybe address that, that would be very, very helpful.
Okay, those are really great questions. Is there somebody who'd like to maybe address those questions? Give some thought to that. Cliff, why don't you take a stab at it? I see you looking up.
No, I don't know how to really, I don't think I'm going to approach that one. I was looking at a bird that's eating some berries outside the window. That's why I was looking.
Oh, I didn't read that one right.
I wasn't going into a Brown study on this subject.
Kirk, are you popping on to give a thought or two?
Yes, because it's something I've thought about quite a bit, and had some experiences myself and wondered about them, what exactly it meant. And it's a vast topic and very complex topic. And there's a long history, you could say, from a theosophical viewpoint, of misunderstanding this whole issue. Because, as Liseth was describing, at the point of physical death, there's a kind of coalescence of the more ethereal aspects of the personality that was just incarnated, that has to do with the desire nature, and referred to in Buddhist texts as the skandhas. Desire, thoughts, longings, unfulfilled wishes, desires, loves for particular persons, and so on. And those coalesce into a form which does have which persists beyond the physical body. And so this is why, in some cases, many cases, it's been reported that people, especially family members, visiting other family members or other known persons, in the form that they took in their past life, using terms, using words, recalling memories, maybe even revealing things that they hadn't known before, to other persons. But that from a theosophical viewpoint, that is still a dying, disintegrating entity that has to go through its own process of death. And that can vary, that period in which it takes to die can vary from a few weeks to many years to even decades, if there was a lot of unfulfilled attractions or other emotions that keep them earthbound. But that form is also, deceptively representing the person that was, because the immortal soul, that which is what they call the true immortal individuality that goes from life to life, in order to complete its post-mortem journey, has to go through these other stages, which are also very elaborately described in Buddhist texts as the Bardo and so on, in which there's a kind of assimilation of the life that has just lived, and a regeneration of the soul, besides rest, before it sort of re-engages and is attracted back again to reincarnate. And that soul, as it's going through those after-death states, enters a condition in which it is completely unaware of earthly conditions. And that's one of the aspects of its regeneration, right? It no longer sees the suffering of human beings. It no longer feels a distance between those it loved. In fact, it said that part of the experience is that we meet our loved ones and that we kind of enjoy an ideal relationship with them. And that it is a kind of heaven. And in fact, this is, it said that one of the ideas from which, the realities from which the Catholic or Christian idea of heaven comes from is because it is a kind of heavenly state, and that the soul is regenerated by that. But if it were to suddenly become involved, directly involved with other person's lives, or other people trying to, penetrate those realms in which they're currently dwelling, it would break that regenerative aspect of that cycle, of that process. And so it's said that those attempts through seances or other means to contact and interact with loved ones who have passed away are, for the most part, and it's not like a hard line case, 100% every case, but for the most part, what you're coming into contact with is that disintegrating personality, but on a more ethereal level. And so it's the immortal individuality, the conscience, the true spiritual faculties of that being have left that form. So it can repeat things that it knew during life. It can sort of imitate the person that was, but the conscience and the higher faculties have left it. So there's a short and hopefully somewhat clear explanation from the way I understand it anyway.
May I share a quote from the daily readings from William Q. Judge?
Please.
He said, philosophy teaches that those who are like unto each other and love each other will be reincarnated together whenever the conditions permit. Whenever one of us has gone further on the road of perfection, he will always be moved to help and comfort those who belong to the same families. When thinking about these deep questions and all the process, we could see that the moment of life, as well as the moment of the death of the physical body, become a sacred moment for the evolution process of the soul. And what we consider death, it means just a physical personality part dying, but understanding or recognizing that what is immortal in us never die, then it brings other perspectives to the dying process. And then considering these, then we always ask, well, what do I do with all this love that we have, isn't it? And then because when we lose somebody that we really love, or was, somebody very important to us, then that love, it's not going to die in either way, because that love, it's part of that immortal part of the soul that is always gonna go with that soul since the moment that the soul is soul. So that's why we always hear that from all the powers, love is the most powerful. And it is because that. It is because it's so genuine and truthful that even in the process of the separation of the soul from that vehicle that used in one incarnation, that love's still there. And it is part of those magnetic connections that we all develop during our physical lifetime that is going to and it's going to be with us and forever, if we want to talk about forever as an eternity, but that's also can bring, a little bit more confusion regarding those terms, but it is part of what we are. So if we approach death from a point of view of just a transformation, a moment of transformation that the soul requires in order to continue the evolutionary process, but it comes with all that love that we have, then definitely there is a thread that is going to be continued from this incarnation to the next to come.
That's a really important accompanying perspective to add, Lisa. Thank you so much. Is there anybody else who wants to address the question that Robin is talking about? Unless, Monica, were you going to address that? And then let's see, could you unmute? So nice.
Not altogether. Thank you. Forgive me. Not altogether. I think that the question I had is somewhat related. First of all, Liz, thank you for this. It's really very deep and activates questions inside. And so part of what my question is about is I'm wondering if I understand the term skandhas properly. And if there are both good and bad skandhas, in the sense that we can be habituated, let's say, in a what we could say is a good behavior of some kind, and still it serves as a block to that connection with the higher aspect of ourselves, the triad, which is our true identity. And so I'm wanting to know if there is a consideration of skandhas other than something kind of negative, which I may have sort of put together in my mind, or if they can be somehow a path to make use of. And how do we do that? I mean, and what, when you think of the idea that we have millions of years of incarnating, you know, what is it that makes the decision to bring to form a skandha that's going to be of use in this incarnation? Do we do that, or does the Atma somehow form as a magnet for that? I have a bit of a confusion, as you might be able to tell.
So this is one of those more, let's say, a little bit higher level or more complex levels of this whole logic of reincarnation. So if we maybe can address it kind of briefly so that we can see it in terms of the overall logic without going down a rabbit hole, because it's a very complex kind of concept.
Okay, apologies.
No, don't apologize. I'm just saying we could spend like a whole rest of this time and a lot more times on addressing skandhas, which is a concept that maybe some people have never heard of before. Yeah, is there somebody who wants to take up this?
Can I make another comment?
Kirk, yes, sure.
Very, very simply, there's a beautiful description by Judge in a article he wrote called The Epitome of Theosophy. And he says that it's a misuse of terms to say that the spiritual can be cultivated. That actually what we're trying to do is cultivate vestures through which our divine nature, which is always compassionate, full of wisdom, full of knowledge. He says, conversing with the gods, feeding on ambrosia, peaceful, joyous, free, that's our higher triad. It is eternally in that condition. But the problem is that when it enters into incarnation through the ray of the mind, of what is called manas, it enters into vestures which block that capacity to be expressed on this plane. And so the whole process of evolution is the evolution of the skandhas, so that they become eventually, a complete and full and continuous expression of that which is already in our higher nature.
Wow.
Yeah.
If
And
I
Thank you.
add, if
are
I
you
add,
translating skandhas as tendencies?
Well, there's an elaborate description in Buddhist philosophy about the fivefold skandhas, but it has everything, has to do with mental predispositions, mental assumptions, emotions, responses, the activities of the senses. So all the things that we would include in that package of an incarnated human being that would make them capable and able to incarnate.
Okay, thank you. Lisette.
yeah, if I might add, there is no such a thing as a bad or good skandha. Skandhas are skandhas, no? Skandhas are those tendencies or those created by us in our incarnation. Now, to see it in a simpler way, what skandhas help us is to understand where we are at that moment. For example, Kirk say how we react to things. Think about it when we are driving. That's a good exercise. And somebody cuts you off. What is the first thing that comes to our mind? We tend to react, for example. So that it can be seen as an skandha reaction or a skandha that we created, but it's a habit that we have been having before. So a great way to see this, and my daughter has it, in her computer, and I don't remember exactly the word, but it says, be careful when what you think, because that becomes your thread of thought. Be careful with what your thread of thought is, because that will become what you say. Be careful with what you say, because that will become the way how you act. Be careful with the way how you act, because that will be the way how your habits are created. And be careful with your habits, because your habit will say who you are. So it is in some way a way to see this in a very in a more practical way for our daily life. So skandha help us to check out where are we, how do I respond to this, and that's why in many cases when there are emergencies, when somebody needs help, and people just stop doing whatever they're doing just to help, then that is part of that higher process or higher skandhas that we have been created during our past life. We never know how we're going to react to certain emergencies, but the response comes because that is part of us. So maybe that's a practical way to see it.
Thank you, Lizette. I'm reminded of that passage, sow a thought, reap an act. Sow an act, reap a habit. Sow a habit, reap a character. Sow a character, reap a destiny. So that that the young ones are getting that already so early. That's just gorgeous. But thank you for a response to, and you as well, Kirk.
Oh. Cliff.
I was just thinking about the title of today's presentation is the logic of reincarnation. And Elizabeth, you were talking that in Theosophy, there's this one important teaching about cycles. I think you referred to as the second fundamental, that everything in nature is based on cycles. There's, night and day. There's the cycle of the seasons. There's waking and sleeping, and there's life and death. Everything, the more you think about nature, the more you think nature really enjoys doing everything in a circular, cyclic manner, not in a linear manner. And if you take the other ideas about life, like you come from nothing and you go to nothing, that's kind of linear. And if you come from, I don't know exactly where, but then you end up in heaven or hell, that's kind of linear. But reincarnation is more circular. And so nature is based upon this idea of cycles that has to do with balance, with equilibrium, with harmony. Those are things that are at work all the time in nature. There's this philosophy of the beer maker Budweiser that says you only go around once in life, so therefore go for all the gusto you can. But if you were to, if everybody was to just to go for all the gusto they can, that would be basically living selfishly, and that would create all kinds of disharmony, disequilibrium, and imbalance. And so you could live this whole selfish life, but then what happens afterwards? It's the idea of karma, which is also the idea of balance and equilibrium and harmony, restoring all those. How would karma be able to work with that particular individual that lives so selfishly, unless there was this opportunity to resolve things in future lives? In other words, to cycle back in to the physical form as to learn more how to live more in harmony with the whole. It just seems to me reincarnation, if you really think about the idea of karma as being the principle of the cyclic nature of nature, and that we're not our bodies, but we're something deeper. We know that we're something much, much deeper than our physical forms. When you add the idea of soul and karma together, it seems like the logic of reincarnation is there, compared to the other options. I'm just thinking out loud.
Thank you, because that's a beautiful way to see it, and very practical one, when we made the analogy on how nature works. And if we become observers of nature, then we can learn also about ourselves. We see it in children. When you have little kids, they need to have a cycle that is consistent. Otherwise, that child will not know how to act, because that is the regular rhythm of nature. And the universe works in different cycles. So, and it is a beautiful way to understand how everything works, because we have the cycles of the universe, we have the cycles in nature, but we have the life cycles of animals. And even we are teaching that to our kids. We get a circle, I'm a teacher, so I work with kids from 3 to 6 years old. And it's amazing how easily they can grasp that concept. When you show, for example, the life cycle of a butterfly, it's pretty remarkable how they can understand nature. And for us, that we become a little bit more complicated when we are growing, we tend to forget that simplicity that is in nature, it happens under the law of nature. I mean, if we see us as part of that cycle that nature has, then our cycle of living and dying, or living and dying and reincarnate, then reincarnation shows that part of that process, which is a cycle, it's circular. And it goes hand to hand with the responsibility that we also generate being conscious beings. Because the difference that we have with the other part of nature is, thanks to those cycles of evolution that have been taking eons of time, we have achieved a point where we have the capacity of thinking and be conscious about it, and to get to that point that okay, I have this consciousness, so what I do with it, and then eventually to become self-conscious of what really we are. there is a question here in the chat. I don't know, Renee, if you want me to read it or you read it, because it
Yeah.
goes hands to hand with what Cliff is saying.
Sure, please.
Okay. The question is, why are we here? I guess maybe from the point of view of life, I don't know. Why are we born? Will be, one of those questions that also kids always ask, or adults, when we see all the suffering, or when suffering touch us very close, isn't it? Because right now there is a lot of people suffering in one part of the world, but we're not aware of that. Maybe when the suffering become part of our awareness, then a question like this will be, present. And then in theosophy, and I think also in Buddhism and Hinduism, well, I think it's a little bit different, but in general lines, we are born to return to the source where we came from. That is very metaphysical. It's very, maybe abstract to the thought. But then if we see it from the point of view of the individuality that we are, not the personality, but the individual soul that is coming with a mission, then our mission could be seen in different levels. One is the responsibility that we have as a soul, in order to get to know who we really, or what we really are, beyond the illusion of the personality that we already know that it changes, because it disintegrates when this body achieves the moment of death. But then in theosophy, and this is one of that these students feel really close to the heart, it's that it's the responsibility that we have with everything else. It's that call for service that we have in the way how we can, based on our own capacities and the situation where we are, but understanding that we can be helpers and bring service to in any situation that we are, then it puts also in another perspective the reason why we're here. It's not just for myself or for the people that is just close to me. It goes beyond that, and then that makes, I don't know, maybe your heart expand in a way that sometimes can be a little painful, because you want to do more for more people and you cannot, but because your possibilities might be limited, or you don't know how to do it. But then the evolutionary process, that life cycle that we have, then gets another sense, gets another
Opportunity.
yes. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm wondering, for those who may be joining from traditions that don't necessarily recognize reincarnation, I think some of you have studied and may have I don't know, references that you could point to. I've heard that actually in early Christianity, just for example, and I don't know whether this is the same about Judaism or Islam, that this was a common belief. Reincarnation was a common, not just a belief, but actually an understanding that was held in the early times of those traditions. And I wonder if someone who has looked into that and studied that would like to speak to that a little.
Well,
Lawan?
I could just offer that not only can the teaching be found in early Judaism, the Hebrew, in Hebrew mystic teachings, but also there are examples of it in the Bible, which I'm not prepared to quote right now, but there are passages attributed to Jesus where he's indicating that he has come before, and that those who have researched native traditions across the world have written about the fact that when those traditions have not been affected by missionary efforts, either Christian or Islamic, that the vast majority of indigenous belief systems include reincarnation as one of their as part of their belief system. And even in Islam, there are examples in the Quran in which references are made to this returning cycle of incarnation, and of particular beings having returned once again, and so on.
Okay, thank you very much. Lawan, I think I saw your hand up. I'm not sure whether it was referring to this, and that's okay. Whatever you wanted to add.
Yeah, I just want to share something related to this topic, which is I'm really interested in because I'm Buddhist disciple. Yeah, I follow Buddhist long time ago, but most recently, since the last few months. So I go to Vietnamese pagoda like very often, at least once per month, and I talk to Vietnamese master monk who provide like a speech monthly about Buddhist philosophy. One time I asked him, because he talked a lot about like life circle of everyone, including animal, any living being. I asked him a question. How do I know how I was? How was my previous life and who I was? And how do I know my next life cycle? It sounds kind of stupid, but I still want to ask, because that's really the topic he talked a lot about, and a lot of Vietnamese people believe everyone has different life, previous life, present life, next life. So surprisingly, he answered me, you know your previous life from who you are today, and you will know your life in the future or your next life from what you've been living your current life. So so that makes me think. I try to think a lot what been happening to my life, I mean my current life. And he did not, although he did not say exactly what happened, but he says you can tell how you were from what you experienced from your current life. So I don't know if I could share more details about that. But for example, just one small example. If I earn a lot of money, I want to save a lot of money, but I cannot. I just that it's just my life. I spend a lot. I earn a lot and I spend a lot. So that means my previous life, probably I borrow money from people I couldn't pay off from my previous life. So that's why this life I need to pay off. Something like that. So very small example, but the master monk gave a lot of other example like that. Yeah. So I believe the karma is very much related to the what Renée say, reincarnation.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So I do believe very much about that. Yeah.
Oh, that's so helpful. Thank you. There are so many wise beings in the world, aren't there? Sharing with us. And I think that it's also, even if we don't tend to think that this idea of reincarnation between lives makes any sense, it's a helpful concept just to consider within one lifetime, that in order for us to be able to learn, as it seems necessary for us to evolve and to help the evolution of everyone else in the universe, we need new circumstances in order to provide ourselves with new ways to grow. And so many people have experienced how one section of their life, while they were experiencing certain circumstances, it was almost like a life unto itself. And then as they moved into a different phase of circumstances, they evolved in a certain way to be able to deal with and respond to those circumstances. And they took the learning from the first part of that life into that next phase. And they use that in yet a new phase of their lifetime. So it's a helpful concept, I think, to consider even within one lifetime, even if it's a little bit out there, to think of it going between lifetimes, just as a concept to think about within our own one lifetime seems very helpful. I'd like to tell you all about next week's theme and presentation, and that'll give somebody a chance, I hope, to consider giving a vote of thanks to our guest for today, Lisa. And so next week, the whole topic for next week is one of the Buddhist paramitas, the Buddhist virtues, great virtues, and that is the virtue of viraga. However, we're just going to look at it from kind of like its underlying meaning, which we're looking at the meaning being the virtue of seeing the whole. So we're going to take up that topic of the virtue of seeing the whole with one of our hula students. She lives back east near Washington, D.C. Her name's Loida Begley, and she has worked in civil service, actually her whole career. So she's going to look at this idea of the virtue of seeing the whole from the civil service aspect of the military tradition. We have a quote from her that's coming from Mahatma Gandhi, known for being a soldier of peace. And we are also going to take up a beautiful quote by President Dwight Eisenhower, as he was leaving his presidency after a life of both military and civil service. So I think it'll be a really fascinating concept to look at, is this virtue of seeing the whole from that particular tradition. It's quite fascinating. So can I ask for somebody who'd like to give Lises and Sade a vote of thanks for us for today?
I would like to say thank you.
Thank you, Monica.
Lizette, you were a gift today. Thank you so very much for your in-depth explanation about these remarkable ideas. We all loved and appreciated. Just excellent. Thank you so much. Namaste.
Yes. And everyone else who has added their attention, their
Thank
thoughts, their answers. Thank you so much. It was a wonderful thing to have all of you and your questions as well. We're happy to stay on. Anyone who wants to talk for another few minutes, we'll leave the Zoom room open. Thank you so much, Lisa. It was really a privilege.
Thank you. I couldn't do this without you guys. It's how it goes. So it goes both ways. That's how it goes. That's how it works. It goes both ways.
It's so true. Aloha, great to have you here, everybody.